We just made decisions. But somehow there's this twisted idea that service is really. One thing there's
I think that was something rich in the email exchange.
we're talking about in every city outside of it.
Get going. You want to do this? Are we ready? Okay, I'd like to welcome all of you today to the special meeting of the Carmel-by-the-Sea Planning Commission. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Ahlborn?
Here.
Commissioner Allen?
Here.
Commissioner Karapetkov?
Here?
And Chair LePage.
Here. Okay, first item of business are the public appearances. Any members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matters of municipal concern which are not on our agenda today. And you need to abide by the Brown Act rules. So at this time, I want to invite any members of the public to make any comments to the Planning Commission that they would like, which are not on our agenda today. Anybody in the chamber want to come up? Nobody? Any hands up online?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll move on from the public appearances. I'm assuming there's no announcements. Any announcements from staff?
No, sir.
Okay, any announcements from the commission? Anyone in the public want to make any announcements? Okay, so that brings us to the orders of business. And today we are reviewing the sixth cycle housing element amendment. So we are going to have a staff report on that to begin with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for letting me sit with you this evening. Anna apologized for not being here. She had some family matters to take care of, so I get to pretend to be planning director today with you. I'd like to give just a brief...
Glad to have you back.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'd just like to give a brief introduction for Marnie, who's going to do the heavy lifting here. As always, these are a bit of a hefty presentation, so you have to bear with us. But start off, as always, with thank yous to Marnie, to Anna, to our consultant Veronica, to the AHA citizen group for all the work that's been done to get us to this point. It's been a long road. And as you know, we're returning basically with a homework assignment that was given to us by our city council to amend the housing element, to remove the 2 city-owned sites and find alternative housing solutions that better spread housing throughout the city. As you know, last year our housing element was adopted, which we are very proud of still because it kept us from being in a position of falling under builder's remedy, so we can be more in control of our future. But like I said, we're here today returning to fulfill that homework assignment from the city council. And I'm really excited on a personal level. I'm really excited about the amendment itself and what it does and what we've done. We definitely met council's goals, but I think we've gone above and beyond and created something for you to review and consider. That's even better than that. It spreads housing throughout the city better. We have fewer eggs in just 2 baskets. I think it really has increased the likelihood of success. It's truly viable to have successful housing spread throughout the city. We can still develop those city properties. There's been a lot of questions throughout this process and all the community meetings. Those city properties can be developed in the future. The great part is, though, because they're not in the housing element, at least in this draft anyway, if it gets amended, if they're not in the housing element, we get to do it our way, including community input. We're not tied to any timelines from the state. There's a mix of affordability. We can do what's right for us. The total number of housing units, how the property is utilized, what we do with it, arts, parks, commercial uses, all those things. We have more control over that when it's not part of our housing element. So what has been done? What are you going to see tonight? It's largely the same what you saw back in May. We took some of your comments there, even it was largely positive, what we heard back then. We took some of those comments, we've worked through those, but it's largely what you saw back in May. There's a little more detail about how we're gonna do what we do. And I'm saying this because I just want you to be assured and the community to be assured that there's no surprises, everything's basically the same. We still want that feedback from you because what we're gonna do is we're gonna take it to the city council next, so we want that feedback. And if you've had new ideas or new thoughts since then, those are still very much welcome. We're excited to get that feedback from you. It's also worth mentioning, and then I'll stop babbling, I wanna thank also our partners at the state, at HCD. We spent a lot of time with them over the last few months. Many detailed meetings back and forth going through minutia that we all love talking about, including our state partners. Really positive feedback on where we've gone with this amendment. We've worked really hard so that when it shows up on their doorstep for the formal submission, there's no surprises for them either. They've used words like innovative, really unique. One of the sayings that came out of our meetings with HCD was we've turned constraints into opportunities. We're really proud of that. I also know, just because I live in Pacific Grove, some of my colleagues that work in Pacific Grove have had HCD throwing our name at them, saying, hey, you guys should be more like Carmel. So I'm like, yeah, all right. So anyway, I was really proud of that, and so that's worth tooting our horn a little bit about. So with that, I will hand it over to Marnie, who's going to run you through this 20-ish, 25-ish minute presentation. So thank you, and thank you again to everybody who's been involved to get us here today.
Thank you, Brandon, for the introduction. So we're going to go ahead and kind of walk through the revised draft of the proposed housing element amendment, and then take an opportunity to receive comment both from the community as well as the commission. So just starting off like I normally do, with California's housing needs. So this is kind of what each housing element cycle starts with, is the state of California estimates what the state's housing need is for the upcoming planning cycle, which is currently an 8-year period. So the state estimated 2.5 million new homes statewide. That was broken down to a regional share of a little over 33,000 units for Monterey and Santa Cruz County, counties and cities. And then that was divvied up, and Carmel's share of that is 349 units, of which 231 need to be affordable. And so our charge through the housing element is to identify housing sites that can accommodate these units over our planning period, which is 2023 through 2031. So how we accomplished this originally with our adopted housing element, this is a map of our sites inventory. We identified 11 sites. We reused 14 sites from our last housing element, which we refer to as the 5th cycle, since we're now in the 6th cycle. So in total, we identified 25 sites for a total of 288 units. And as you can probably see on this map, this does include the city-owned sites. This didn't quite get us to the 349, but we had some other strategies, including a hospitality employee housing program, some ADU projections, and then a couple projects that were in the pipeline, which means they were either in planning review or had planning entitlements and were working towards building permits. So in total, we had identified 410 units. And again, this is in our adopted housing element. And what you see below that 410, you're going to kind of see that formula throughout my presentation. That's the breakdown by affordability. And you can see the little key at the bottom of the slide. So starting from left to right, that's 114 very low, 87 low, 58 moderate, and 151 market rate units. So this is what is in the currently adopted housing element. It meets our regional housing needs allocation. It meets state law requirements, and it includes a buffer between about 15 and 20%, which is what most cities were sort of aiming for this cycle. And that buffer is an assumption that some of the sites may not develop, so you have a little bit of wiggle room there. And we were right kind of in the middle of that target. So our housing element was adopted in April of 2024. In July, the City Council adopted a resolution directing staff to look for some alternatives to the city-owned sites. This was, an effort to look for ways to disperse our housing opportunity sites throughout the community rather than concentrating them on the city-owned sites. This effort has been a collaboration between city staff and the AHA residential group. And for those who don't know, AHA stands for the Affordable Housing Alternatives. We've been meeting together on a regular basis since at least December of 2024. There have been community meetings in August of 2024 as well as March of 2025. And then as Brandon had mentioned, there's been multiple meetings with the State Department of Housing and Community Development to review and receive feedback on the strategies as we've been developing them. They've been very generous with their time and giving us feedback as we've been going along. And then we also were before both the Planning Commission and City Council in May of this year to talk about the 5 strategies before sending a draft to the state for what we were calling as a friendly review, which was just an informal look at our strategies to see, if there were any kind of holes or any glaring things missing in our analysis that we might need to address before submitting a formal amendment. So HCD completed that review and gave us some feedback, and we've been working on completing the analysis and getting the document ready for the formal submittal. So on this slide, what you see is a comparison of our existing sites inventory and the proposed map, which shows the new sites inventory. And I think what you'll see is most notable is the difference in the dispersion of potential housing opportunity sites. There's also a color coding which identifies the different types of housing opportunities that the proposed amendment offers. So again, we're still reusing some sites from our 5th cycle housing element. Those show up in yellow. We have 3 church sites which we've identified that we would get RENA credit for. So in our current housing element, only 1 site is included, and it's all market rate. So with these 3 church sites, the strategy allows us to count them towards our lower income RENA. We have some new ADU projections as well that differ from our adopted housing element. And then again, making sure we capture our pipeline projects because those do count towards our RENA. Some additional housing sites opportunities include our mixed income incentive program, which we have 12 units identified, our new live work program, and our hotel to residential conversion program. And I'm going to touch on each one of these. But in total, we've identified a potential for 439 units, so a little bit more than what's in the adopted housing element. And you can see the affordability breakdown there as well. So with these revised strategies, we would still achieve our regional housing needs allocation but we would do it in a way that disperses the housing units throughout the village rather than concentrating them on a few sites. So what happens next? So there is a public comment period, which, has started with the release of this staff report. So if anybody has any comments, questions, now is the time to definitely send those our way. We have our special meeting tonight, and we'll be having another meeting on November 3rd. So again, this is to give the public an opportunity to review the amendment again, submit any comments or questions they might have. That's also an opportunity for both the Planning Commission and City Council to give staff comments so that we can incorporate any revisions before submitting the formal amendment to the state. There is a 60-day review period. Once we do submit to the state, there will be a 30-day mid-review check-in with staff, which is pretty customary, where they kind of give us a heads up on how the review is going. And then at the end of that 60 days, we'll receive a letter from HCD which says, your amendment is either ready to adopt or it needs some additional revisions to meet state law. So now I'm going to touch on the 5 strategies. I'm not going to go into painstaking detail because, the strategies are the same strategies that we've been, discussing since December. So I'm going to kind of do a high level. There is more detail in the slides though, so if you do have questions, we can certainly come back to it. I think it is worth noting that of these 5 strategies, 4 of them are in the housing element right now. Only one of them, which is the Downtown Live Work program, is truly a new strategy. So what we've done in working with the AHA group is really looking at what was in the housing element already and what could we do to really retool the program so that we could get RHNA credit for it. And so starting with the hotel to residential program, this is the program that really, HCD was really intrigued by this particular program. It's not something that they've seen before. They're very, very interested in it, as are we, in seeing how this moves forward. So this is the program that identifies the smaller underperforming hotels within the village. It encourages the conversion of those hotels to multifamily housing. And then as an incentive for doing that, allows for the transfer of those hotel development rights to another site within the commercial district. Under the existing program, the way it's written, the conversion of the hotel would include 15% affordable units, and none of those affordable units were captured for RHNA credit. So we had 0 credit under this program. So under the revised program, 75% of the converted hotel rooms would be affordable, and we would get RHNA credit for those hotel rooms, or for those units. And in exchange, to help support and incentivize the program, those hotel keys would be transferred to another site downtown. Those keys could be sold. They could be added to an existing hotel, or a new hotel could be constructed with those keys. So there's a couple different options that those hotel keys could be used for. And we would get a pretty sizable amount of affordable units in the process. The other thing that we really like about this program is that many of our older hotels were originally conceived as apartments. So there's opportunities to really convert existing buildings back to residential use. But there certainly are opportunities as well for those buildings to be reconstructed as multifamily. So that is a possibility. This is an updated flow chart that shows how the concept works. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we can certainly come back to it during the discussion if there's any questions. Again, the incentives under this program are really allowing the transferable development rights. What would normally happen under sort of a traditional zoning situation is that once that hotel converted to residential, the hotel use would just simply disappear. Those development rights would go away. So under this program, being able to transfer those hotel keys to another site really is a valuable investment. There also is, we talk a lot about prioritizing water to support these housing element programs. So just ensuring that we have water available in our affordable housing category, to support these. And as you can see on the comparison on this slide, a hotel room and a one-bath apartment use about the same amount of water. So not a big difference there. But certainly, transferring those hotel keys off-site are gonna require some additional water allocation to really make this project or this program viable. Another incentive is the potential for some additional floor area increases. There's also an incentive for hotel residential suites. And this is a hybrid type of unit where it would be an owner-occupied unit for a portion of the year, and then it would be in the hotel inventory for the remainder of the year. And so, part of this really is making sure that financially this program is going to be, sustainable, it's going to be viable. Converting an existing hotel to affordable housing is not like a profitable enterprise. So, looking for incentives to sort of offset that cost, I think is going to be really key to the success of this program. And then, of course, streamlining the project review, expediting permitting, and then looking at our permit fees are, just kind of key components to all of these programs. I do want to kind of mention at this point, because I was going to mention it earlier before I started, but, these programs that are in the housing element, once they get adopted, they don't become actual laws or regulations, right? They're policies and programs that still need to go through a process, a public process. Oftentimes, they're going to require zoning code amendments, and that's where we're going to further develop the finer details of what these incentives look like, and what portions of the code need to be amended for the program to actually be implemented. So I just wanted to make sure that that part was clear. This is sort of the policy programmatic side. There's still an implementation side where we would get into more of the details of how to implement each of these programs. So again, the benefits of this program are many. We've talked about these before. I think it's just worth highlighting that, this is a privately funded endeavor. So this program doesn't rely on public funding. The whole intent behind the incentives and transferring the development rights is really to allow for redevelopment that is going to be self-sustaining. And so under this program, we looked at the universe of hotels within the village and identified a subgroup that totaled about 379 units that could potentially fit the category of underperforming. So these are opportunities for potential conversion to multifamily units. We looked at a conversion rate, so it's not going to be one-to-one, one hotel room to one apartment unit. So based on some conceptual designs, we landed at about an 85% conversion rate between the hotel room to apartment unit. This also allows for a mix of unit sizes. And then just to be conservative, we cut that in half. So you can see the potential that's out there is much greater than what we're estimating, but we're really being conservative when it comes to what we're asking the state to count towards our RHNA. And based on our conversations with the state, we believe that they're comfortable with this methodology. So 161 units under this program. You can see the income mix there. So a pretty significant contribution to our regional housing needs allocation. Moving on to the next strategy, our downtown mixed income incentive program. Again, our existing housing element talks about mixed income projects, mixed use projects, but doesn't get into a whole lot of detail that allows us to take RHNA credit for those programs. So this is another program that largely, with the work with the AHA group, was really further developed. The core principles behind this program was really inspired by the layout of Trevette Court. For those who don't know, this is a 14-unit low-income senior housing project on an 8,000 square foot lot. It achieved a density of 76 dwelling units per acre, which is pretty significant for our village. So, looking at the possibility of what can be done under that model, and my numbers are still messed up. I swear I fixed that. So that's kind of how this program sort of began, was just looking at that model of Trevette Court, looking at the size of an 8,000 square foot lot and what could be done. The second core principle is really, again, incentivizing mixed income housing rather than 100% affordable housing. Our code currently has provisions for 100% affordable housing, and we have not had anyone build 100% affordable housing outside of this one Carmel Foundation project. So looking for other strategies to actually produce units and doing that through a mixed income model. And again, doing it without public funding. And then also looking for ways to accommodate families with children. So some of the incentives under this program include a by right density of 22 to 40 dwelling units per acre. So this is a change from both existing conditions as well as what's in the adopted housing element. So in the adopted housing element, the plan was to raise the minimum density from basically 0 to a floor of 33 to really encourage the production of more units. What this program proposes to do is to create a range of 22 to 40. Our current density of 22 aligns with the amendment proposal. Under this program, we also would eliminate the requirement for a conditional use permit, so that streamlines the process. There's no affordable housing requirement within this density range. So this program sort of creates a foundation by which new units can be created, and then layers on bonuses and incentives for projects that incorporate affordable housing. And that's where the up to 88 dwelling units per acre comes in. That's an existing ceiling, so we're not proposing to change that. Also looking at floor area ratio bonuses as an incentive for affordable units. Again, that priority water allocation, expediting applications, waiving permit fees where we can, and then providing pre-application development meetings. So program benefits really increases opportunities throughout the commercial districts, creates incentives for mixed income housing. Again, another project that doesn't rely on public funding, which can be very competitive and very scarce. And then again, that goal of trying to get to larger bedroom counts to accommodate families with children. So for this program, we identified 2 sites for a total of 12 units. The potential downtown is certainly much greater. Property owners can take advantage of this program, but for asking the state for credit for our RHNA, we've identified just the two sites. So I'm going to move on to the third strategy, which is the one that I had mentioned is a truly brand new strategy, which is the downtown live work. And so the way that this would come to fruition is simply by creating a new land use category that would allow for a hybrid of both commercial and residential in a single tenant space. There are many off-street and upper-story commercial spaces that are underutilized or vacant. The AHA group did an amazing safari of the downtown where they walked and inventoried all of the commercial buildings and just identified a tremendous opportunity for a program like this. And so, you know, under this program, a property owner has the potential to make more money charging an affordable live-work rent than they do right now charging a commercial rent for some of these sort of off the beaten path spaces, these smaller spaces. So we really think there's some great potential here. And we've identified a number of sites that we think could work under this program. So similar incentives that you've seen for the other programs with water, priority processing. One of the great benefits of this program is that it's utilizing existing building square footage. So taking what's underutilized and really activating existing spaces, encouraging more residents full-time downtown, activating storefronts, opportunities, you know, for affordable housing, you know, for our local artists, bringing local serving businesses back to Carmel, reducing vacancy rates. There's a lot of positives under this program, and again, allows for the creation of affordable housing without public funding. So under this program, we've identified the potential for 78 units. And again, this isn't the entire universe. This is a selection of sites that we identified that we thought, you know, had great potential, but certainly, you know, any property owner downtown interested in the program can absolutely take advantage of it. They don't have to be specifically on this list. And these all contribute towards our regional housing needs allocation. Okay, moving on to accessory dwelling units. This is an existing program in our housing element. You We are working on our ADU ordinance. We have a responsibility to process amendments to our local ordinances as new laws are adopted. There are other state law requirements that we're bound to adhere to. So that's all the pretty standard stuff. But under the proposed amendment, some additional commitments that have been included are a pre-sales inspection program, and this is to identify, ADUs that are out there that maybe aren't currently being counted towards our inventory. So basically getting credit for structures that we aren't currently aware of. A renter match program to help with occupancy of ADUs. Looking at different ways we can incentivize affordability. And then just doing more robust outreach and education when it comes to accessory dwelling units. So based on our past trends, we had to kind of go back and kind of look at the data. We updated some of our annual reports that were submitted to the state, looked at our average between 2019 and 2024, and we issued building permits for about 10 accessory dwelling units per year. So using that projection, we're proposing 70 accessory dwelling units over the entire planning period, which goes through 2031. So that would yield 70 units that we can count towards our regional housing needs allocation. And so that is also part of the strategy. And then I believe this is the fifth strategy, which is the religious facilities. So we've got 3 church sites that we're currently working with that are all interested in doing some type of housing on their property. Senate Bill 4 allows for churches to build housing on their property without having to rezone. So looking for ways to kind of take advantage of that. And really further kind of their mission in serving people by providing for housing needs. Similar incentives, these sites will need water allocation, help with, permitting fees. They're certainly going to need some technical assistance, and then also would be a good candidate for some trust fund support. As you may recall, we have a program to set up a housing trust fund as well. So across all 3 sites, we're projecting potential for 65 units. Again, all counted towards our regional housing needs allocation. So when you add all of these strategies together, this is what sort of enables us to sort of retool our sites inventory, be able to replace those city-owned sites with more dispersed housing throughout the community. Our projected capacity at 439 units would achieve our RHNA, just like our current housing element does, with a little bit more of a buffer at about 26%. So there is definitely a potential here. And I think as Brandon mentioned earlier, this doesn't necessarily take the city-owned sites completely, off the table. What it does is just relieves the pressure. As you may recall, under the housing element that's adopted, there were some very tight timelines that the city had to perform under for the redevelopment of those sites. And as we sort of felt with the tight timelines and getting the housing element adopted, it doesn't always yield the best outcome when we're put under a lot of pressure. So what these strategies do is it still achieves the goal of meeting our regional housing needs allocation through some really innovative strategies that we do believe will actually produce housing. But the city-owned sites still remain available, and it could, at the council's discretion, be utilized at some point in the future. So some other revisions, I did go over this in May, not a lot of this will really be new. I did want to spend a little bit more time though on this one. We have a current program for employee housing. This relates to hospitality employees. We have retained this program in the housing element. Originally, it did contribute towards our RENA. We've actually sort of backed this one out and we're no longer asking for RENA credit. And part of the reason for that was there was a deadline, some pressure kind of being applied that if the program didn't perform by a certain time, then we would have to do some type of rezoning to sort of force the program. And we weren't really comfortable with that. We wanted it to be more of an incentive. So we do think that there's some interest in this program, so we didn't want to eliminate it from the housing element. So we've kept it in, we're just not gonna include it for the RENA credit. We have deleted a couple programs. I did mention this back in May. I've been kind of going back and forth with the local universal design standards. It was in, then it was out, and then I put it back in, now it's back out again. So apologize for any confusion with that one. With the recent changes in state law about not applying any additional local codes to residential, this one has since come back out again. So formatting changes, again, we did some kind of rearranging, hopefully to make the document a little bit more user-friendly. We have populated all of our quantified objectives and included all of our timeframes. The scattered quotes have been removed. This is a summary from the May 14th meeting that we had with the Planning Commission. General support for the programs and the approach. What we heard was wanting to ensure that the ADU program has a way to capture affordable ADUs that are not deed restricted. This really is an implementation measure, and we definitely hear that comment and are looking at different opportunities that we could get credit for those ADUs. So that will be something that we continue to kind of work on as we get into implementation. Water, acknowledging our 14 acre foot allocation. Live work program, bringing diversity to the downtown. So this is what we heard from May 14th. We're still looking for some additional feedback that the Planning Commission might have. And then I'm getting close to the end here. Not sure if I made my 20 minutes, but our key takeaways are, this proposed amendment does accomplish the goal of dispersing the 149 units on the city-owned sites throughout the village. Implementation will come after adoption. So again, these programs aren't going to just magically start happening once, a revised housing element is adopted. Like there's additional work that needs to be done. There's additional community outreach, input, amendments. I just want to assure everybody that this is not the end. These programs need to be worked into ordinances, and some additional decisions would need to be made at a future date. The substance of the revisions to the housing element do focus on these 5 strategies. And again, as we go through our formal review with the state, there's always the potential that there might be some changes. So that's just something to keep in mind. So with that, I will end my presentation. This is just a recap of the next steps that I already kind of went through. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? You have a question? Go ahead.
Well, first, the question is, could I please hear a round of applause for this outstanding work, truly. Marnie, thank you, and to everyone who's been a part of this process. First, a question, just a process question for clarity. The decision to move this forward to state, that's a city council decision, right? That happens at city council level?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And another sort of process and documents control question, that I made note that the footer in the documents for today, the footer seemed to read Carmel-by-the-Sea 6th cycle housing element update adopted, November 2025. I didn't see the word draft in there. Just a documents control note.
Okay.
The city hired a consultant to support the project. Do you happen to remember the amount of that contract, the value of that contract?
So that contract is not to exceed the 59,999.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I remember, but I thought I'd double check with you.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. And so with our 2024 adopted element, there were, and I mentioned this in our last meeting, Planning Commission meeting, there were 27 programs with promise dates between last year and coming up in December. And it seems that with the proposed amendment, there's quite a few that straddle one another. I know that there's been some adjustments. Do you know off the top of your head how many, some of those we've completed, haven't we? Some of those programs, some of the Muni Code amendments and things like that?
We have completed the reasonable accommodation policy update.
Right, I remember.
And we're currently working on the water allocation policy updates,
Right, and the ADU ordinance we're working on.
working on the ADU ordinance.
Okay.
We have not completed any zoning code amendments or municipal code
Right.
amendments yet.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, because the update was in discussion. One of the programs was for funding an associate planner, wasn't it? Did that ever come about, or is that a future goal? Because this seems like just a boatload of work.
Yes, so that position is funded. I believe I'm currently filling that position, and we are recruiting to backfill my current planning position.
I thought I noticed two hats on your head.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Would you speak again? I know Brandon began our meeting today with this, and then Marnie, you spoke about it again. Many people share the opinion that it's important to remove the city-owned sites from our inventory. There's just several aspects of that doesn't align with our city character and really our ability to fulfill our RENA. But could you just speak one more time to the difference between having a city-owned site? You know, Brandon, you spoke to perhaps how we could use those sites, that if we remove those sites from the inventory, then the city has more options or greater options for how those sites are utilized.
Yeah.
Could you just speak to that a little bit, either of you?
Okay, I'll give you a break because that was a lot of talking. It was longer than 20 minutes. That's okay. So it's a great question. Short answer is yes, it gives us more flexibility, basically. Those, especially the Sunset Center site, but Vista Lobos also, if you go back like 20, 25 years in like newspaper articles and city documents, we've been, the city, when I say we, I mean the city, has been trying to figure out what to do with those sites for a long, long time.
Yeah.
There's even some articles and papers with, former Mayor Ken White speaking
Nice.
about what to do on there. So it's not like a new concept to do something there. The benefit of pulling them out of the housing element is that we're completely can control of our own destiny in the future. Meaning that when we committed it in the first cycle, the first version of the housing element, which was adopted, that was sort of one of the ways to get the housing element adopted and protect us from that builder's remedy. Because we have complete control over the sites, we could give some surety to the state that there will be housing built here. Now, what this whole effort's been done over the last year and a half is to provide that proof, that viability, I use that word a lot when we were going through the adoption process, the viability for all these other strategies to get that credit from the state to say, yeah, these other things that we're doing, spreading the housing throughout the city, those are actually viable because of this work that we've done in collaboration with AHA to get all that great data and provide that proof. So now we believe, after having worked with HCD, that they're going to also agree and say, yeah, you actually can develop housing outside of those 2 city-owned sites that you don't fully control. You can, there's a way for that to happen, but we needed those sites in the first draft that was adopted in order for the state to say, yeah, okay, this is viable, what you've done. So the benefit of it is that, like I said, we have complete control over what we do there. The city, and when I say the city in this context, the city council, when and if they decide to release some sort of RFP for any sort of use on those sites, public-private partnership or whatever, we have control over what it's crafted. When we left it in the housing element, we had to make sure that it met a certain mix of housing types, a certain number of housing units, that the space was a certain thing. Now we have, it can be very Carmel. There can be an art component, there can be a parks component, there can be some commercial, there can be some residential, there can be a better connection to the Sunset Center, cultural arts, performing campus. It can be more deferential to the historic, the nationally recognized historic structure. All that because it's not tied to a state mandated housing program. We are in control of it into the future. This is a really long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but that's.
No, it's a great answer.
That's
No, it's
truly,
perfect.
truly
Thank you.
why we have a term in planning we call highest and best use. I truly believe that those 2 sites right now are not being used for their highest and best use. They are being used for parking, which is great, we need that, but that is it's not used as well as it could be. I think parking still needs to be a component, but the highest and best use of those 2 properties has never really fully been discovered. And I don't think we would have discovered it if it remains part of our housing element.
Perfect, that's very helpful. And I think a lot of people will appreciate hearing that
Yeah.
answer, so
Thank you.
thank you. I do have just a few more questions. Let's see, you've answered that one. All right, so this is my last question. Let's say I'm a developer and I have property and I'm going to put in, I'd like to renovate that property and have some mixed use, so I'd like some retail on the bottom. I'm going to put in some residential, and some of the residential is going to be affordable. And let's say I'm able to bring a plan to you Q1 2026. So, given the timeline, we have a current adopted amendment, a current adopted plan. The amendment may be still in process during that time. Quite a few of we won't have our odds yet, most likely. So what if I'm a developer and I bring a program and a project, how's that going to be reviewed? What can I expect, just in brief? What can I expect in terms of a timeline and review process, and who will be looking at what I bring, and the likelihood of success walking out of City Hall?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we will always, and we always do, review projects based on the codes at the time. ADU ordinance, take that for example. We use our current ADU ordinance design guidelines. Even though they're in process, we use our current design guidelines. So the same would be true in your scenario. If someone walked in with a project, affordable or not, it would be reviewed under our existing codes. Now, our current codes do have some incentives for affordable units. There's some additional density. Our housing element that we're proposing, and it would be under our existing housing element, the adopted housing element would control. And so there are some incentives in that already for affordable housing. Mm-hmm. The proposed amendments just make that better. There's better incentives, especially for that type of development you're saying. So, we would have a conversation with the applicant and say, here's where we're at in the process. Hopefully, fingers crossed, a housing element amendment is in place by that point. And we can say, look, we're 2-3 months away from taking the municipal code language that makes this a reality to the planning commission. You can either move forward under the existing housing element and the existing municipal code, or you can wait a couple months. And so we would give them that option. If they wanted to proceed under the existing municipal code, then that's what we would do.
So the things like waivers and concessions, let's assume that I have a staff that is very well-versed in state housing law. Can I apply for those waivers and concessions?
Yeah, if there's things that don't require a municipal code amendment for us to be able to grant, like state law things, then certainly we can enact those. But when there's things, like floor area bonuses that have to have a municipal code amendment, those will have to wait.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's new information.
Yeah.
And a last question that I don't think you'll be able to answer, but I will bring it up in my comments.
Well, I
and it
should
has-
say, I'm so sorry, forgive me for interrupting.
Yeah.
If a project is a certain level of affordability,
Yes.
then I don't know them off the top of my head, so forgive me, but there are certain, like 100% affordable projects, when they come in, they are granted things by state right. But I'm just saying, like, the incentives that we have baked into our housing element that are just a little bit extra than you would be able to get from the state or from us otherwise. That was my point.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
And there's very limited parking that's associated with the housing element, is that correct? So many of these units in the core commercial have zero parking associated with them, correct?
So the housing element doesn't change the current parking requirements, right? So the prohibition on parking in the central commercial district is a current standard, and that doesn't change under the housing element.
Got it. Thank you. All done. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I had a couple of questions, just clarifications. You were talking about the hotel keys and the allocation of water. So is it my understanding that at this time, I think we have 948 available hotel rooms? And those are all permitted? They're all issued?
We're at our
Yes.
cap, if that's what you're asking. Yeah, we
Right,
can.
we're at our cap.
Yeah,
So
we're at our cap. That's right.
So all of those hotel rooms currently have water allocated to them, is that correct?
Correct.
So what is the additional allocation of water that is necessary?
So when the hotel converts to multifamily residential, that hotel water goes to the residential project. So when those hotel keys are transferred off-site to another site, they need water to go with
So
them.
the water doesn't go with the hotel keys?
No.
Okay, all right, that clarifies that, thank you. The other question I had was, you talked about alternatives to deed restriction, and there was kind of a generalized statement about it in your staff report. Could you just be a little more specific about that? And also, whether the alternatives, is that something that can be approved by ACD, or what's the status of that, of any alternative?
Do you mean for ADUs?
No, I just mean for low income, designated low income housing. It's my understanding, I asked the question in our last review of the housing element, if all low income housing needed a deed restriction, and staff said yes.
Correct.
Okay, but in this report, you made mention that there might be some alternative ways to determine low income housing. And I think you were tying it to market conditions. Is that your intent, or did I read that wrong, or what is you mentioned the alternative, so what is it?
So for accessory dwelling units, so all of the affordable housing units that are downtown, as part of the mixed income incentive program, the live work program, affordable units on church properties, those are all deed restricted affordable units. It's the ADU program where we're looking for incentives for affordable housing, or alternatives to how we can show the state that they're somehow affordable without a deed restriction. So ADUs are the only exception to the deed restriction right now.
Okay, so what is that alternative?
So one of the things the state told us, because they recognize that it's hard to get someone to deed restrict an ADU, is they said if you can come up with some sort of way to prove to them after an ADU's been built, because that's when you really truly get the credit, is after something's been permitted and built. After it's been built, if we can come up with some sort of program to, get people to voluntarily, tell us that it's being rented or some way to check what the rental is, and we can show it to the state on some sort of list, like, here's the ADUs we have, we know that these ones are being rented, it's, $900 a month or whatever, and it falls within those categories. It's not restricted, but just to be able to show somehow to the state that it's being used as intended, that's an alternative to a deed restriction. So that would be, one of the ways in the implementation part that Marnie was talking about, setting up the program in such a way that getting people excited about building an ADU also includes them knowing that they might have to share a little bit of information with us, but that little bit of sharing of information means they're going to get some incentives versus having to do a deed restriction.
But what's the incentive to lower the rent on your ADU?
You get some of the incentives that we were talking about, that, expedited, the waiver of permit fees, access to those, the pre-approved plans, things like that.
Okay, that's my question. Any other questions for staff? Okay, at this time, I'm going to open it up to the public for their comments. So come forward, please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I have laryngitis, not contagious. Marnie, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I also want to thank the committee, the AHA committee. They did an amazing job. And they did the job without compromising, from what I can tell, the integrity of our town. And that, to me, is something that we all need to be aware of and be vigilant about at this time. The elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, is parking. And I just can't fathom, Marnie, and maybe you can give us insight to this, that the state would mandate such a program and think that people who have affordable housing don't have cars. People have a cell phone and they have a car. I don't know how they do it, but they do. And it creates a real issue, especially for towns like ours. So I have tried to reach out to our Congress people who represent us in the state, and they will not talk to me or anybody else. They will let us speak to their chief of staff, but not one of them will come and speak to us. And I don't understand that, because they represent us and we have a real issue with parking with this type of program. So I want to throw that out there, because maybe somebody has a contact or a manner that we can have these people come to our town to see what we're really about, to see the implications of what they're mandating us to do to deal with this type of issue. I did meet with Jimmy Panetta. He did meet with me. And he told me that it was not his field, that he could give us money, but that, and he directed me, he told me who to address at the state level, Addis and Laird, and he told me who to ask for, and I tried for months to get them to get a meeting with me, to no avail. So I think that's very important that we try to get them to come. As far as the parking, there are issues in our town. I have spoken to Chief Trainer, because we have not had, we've had a existent parking enforcement, where I don't know what happened to our meter maids, and I'm not sure what happened to us enforcing, because when I moved here in 1975, I saw meter maids, I saw employees that did not park. I owned a business, a hotel at the time. The employees parked out of the commercial district and walked to their job. You don't see that very much anymore. So I spoke to Chief Trainer, and he is very aware of the problem, and they are hiring additional meter maids. Right now, there has not been any meter maid on the weekends, if you can imagine that, which has made the parking issue even greater. So, and again, about the employee parking. I was sure that there was some kind of, I don't know if it was an ordinance, but there was a rule, something that encouraged the employees to have the owners have their employees park outside the commercial district.
You about ready, you've been past your 3 minutes now, are you
Okay,
kind of summarizing?
yes.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the parking lots off because we need the parking lots, whatever they decide to do with the parking lots, to be done in a calm manner and not against a timeline with developers swarming around trying to do what's going to be good for them and not our town. So I really appreciate what the AHA committee has done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Fred Kern. I've listened to everything, and I know you've done a lot of work. And it's obviously the staff has done this work, the AHA group have worked very hard. But I think what you're doing is you're kind of chewing at the edges. You have a wonderful plan that's been approved for the Sunset Center and Villalobos that went to the state. What you really ought to do is to bring in the private sector now. Put it out for an RFP. You would be surprised what you would get, just like the parking that was just mentioned. The number one problem I see in this town is parking. You could build underground parking. You could quadruple the amount of parking that you have at Sunset Center and never even see it. We have an income problem. 3.5 years from now, we're going to be broke. The keys, wonderful idea. Why don't we trade a hotel key? And if you trade the hotel key, then you have to build workforce housing. So it becomes a problem that the developers would have to do. Hey, I want to have this hotel key, I got to build workforce housing, and I got to have a location to do a hotel. What better place to do a hotel than over at Sunset Center? As long as it's 2 stories, you could accommodate all those guests whenever we have events, the Bach Festival or the Symphony or whatever we're having there, they could stay at the hotel. You could incorporate the HRS. Lots of things they've done. I'm just saying, one group that's been completely left out of this process is the developers. And if you put out an RFP, it doesn't mean you have to accept it, but you're going to get an awful lot of good ideas. And let people submit the plans to you. Over the next 90 days, say, we want developers. Put it out. You'll get a lot of good ideas. It doesn't mean you have to follow it or anything else. The term they use, the best and highest use, being a developer, that means what makes the most money. That isn't what we want in this town. We want to make money, pay our bills, have new parking, have new housing that we're required to have, but incorporate both ideas and have a third group, the developers come in and present plans. If we just stick with, we don't want anything at Sunset Center, I know you've talked to people, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but people don't give up property and lose money on it in the rent. There's no incentive. You have no money to give to people. The town doesn't have extra money to be giving incentives. Water's not an incentive, because you lose money doing the deal just because you have water. And I've talked to the church, the people over there, they have no interest in selling that property unless it's at market rate. You even say it's at market rate. That's where most of the people will be. But if you were trading one hotel room, one key, and you said you've got to build a workforce housing first, and you get the workforce housing, and you get the income. And every hotel group I've spoken to, if it's a 5-star hotel, they'll pay a 15% TOT. So you get parking, you get the hotel, you get workforce housing, and it's all done through the private sector. The city makes a huge income on the TOT and the parking, and we eliminate 4 problems all with one shot. So at least give us developers 90 days to give you plans, including the Sunset Center, including Vista Lobos, and any other site in town. That's all. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the work I did.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next speaker, please.
I'd just also like to say you guys did a hell of a job with everything. A lot of work and appreciate all the help. I would like to reiterate a couple of comments we just heard. You know, parking I think is our main problem, and this is a huge component that's going to compound the parking problem, right? If you got 349 units, is that 1.5 to 2 people maybe a unit? How many cars is that? If you actually try to keep them in town and have them work here, the car sits on the street all day. It's probably not the best looking car. You really degrade the village. I think there's a lot of components that you need to try to take in with parking that affect a lot of different things that kind of get missed in some of this. I don't know much about a lot of what you guys spoke to today. One thing that maybe is more of a lame's question is if you can do anything else with the keys. It sounds like we're rewarding underperforming hotels with a way out and giving them a benefit to try to incentivize this, you know, where I don't know what normally happens to the keys if they go to the city and the city gets to issue them out and make revenue. I don't know how all that works, but if there's another way of gaining revenue from that to the city instead of a, you know, a lackluster hotel, you know, that maybe would make sense to me, I guess. Incentivizing, you know, with the gentleman's point, you know, the incentives, I know you guys are trying to get every type of incentive you can, but it does seem like, you know, there may need to be a little bit more to push some of these things. And again, I'm playing more devil's advocate on accident. I'll take these as you guys want to. I'm really out of the loop, so. But yeah, parking I think is huge. And if you already have a problem, you know, having one of these structures designated for parking, somehow tying it to this whole, it seems like we were able to find a ton of places for all the units, you know, maybe designate one of those for parking or something like that. I don't know, I feel like that would, you know, be a good potential option. That's really all I have. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. You guys.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Chair LePage, Commissioners, Marnie, great job. Incredible work putting this all together over the last many months. I've been pleased to be a part of the AHA group since the beginning of this calendar year. And I think that what we have before you is a plan that's really considered all different aspects of the housing mandate from the state and really adapted that and made it right-sized for Carmel. So I'm pleased with the work product that's come forward. I do think that there have been, as several of the speakers have pointed out, and I think even most people who've been working at this issue for a long time would admit to a couple of blind spots. I think that water, you know, I read Commissioner Locke's comments that were submitted for tonight's meeting. I think we're spot on, you know, so I hope that what you put forward to the council will include some comments about the water allocation that I think you know, the water really needs to be allocated to all the categories, including commercial, as Stephanie's letter pointed out. And I think that applies to the Live Work program. It applies to the hotel program. It applies to the church sites, you know, to the MIPS program, you know, any program that's going to include some commercial square footage is going to need additional water. So I hope that is taken into account. The parking, you know, it is the elephant in the room. I have my office in town. I park every day in town. I see it firsthand. I'm not sure that anybody has come up with a silver bullet to fix that, but I do think that the housing is not necessarily going to create a bigger problem for parking. I do think that there is an opportunity with the housing element to maybe help to address it and to fix it. You know, and maybe that goes back to what happens on the city-owned sites, where that is really a part of future planning. But I do hope that we can come up with some strategies for parking collectively that will, keep this a place that people want to come to visit and people want to come to work and people will live. And then my last comment is just really about the staff resources. I've spoken to this before. I think there was some discussion in putting this amendment together to creating, the position that Marnie has filled in terms of adding planning resources. But what we're really talking about, if we're committing to this plan, is approving something close to about 50 new units a year. We have a hard time getting 50 houses remodeled, approved a year with the staff resources that we have. So I hope that could also be addressed. Probably that's for the city council to discuss in terms of the budget. Consider how this will be implemented.
Thank you, Erin, for your comments. The next speaker, please.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to offer, actually, Marnie, before I get started, do you have that chart of the income levels and the comparison with the live work? Do you have that handy? It would be in the housing element amendment, the one that shows like what a rent is for commercial off the track, which you referred to. The reason I'm asking.
I think it's attachment 8.
Oh, you already
Attachment
know.
Was it the very last page of the packet?
The only reason I wanted to bring it up is because I really like Stephanie, everybody's comments, but also Stephanie's, and I don't want to give her short shrift since she's not here. But first of all, I just wanted to offer, of course, that a lot of the stalwart AHA nerds are here in the room and ready to answer any questions or take up any, so I'm sure we're all eager to help. While Marnie's pulling that out, I also thought if I were new to this, and maybe I'm answering a question that you guys don't have, but a number of times Marnie said that there was we have the potential to do X number, but we're going to present to HCD X divided by 2. I just wanted to educate or remind us all that there's a good reason for doing that that's not obvious really, which is that when a cycle changes from HE6 to HE7, and maybe you already know this all, but you have a higher level of responsibility to explain sites that didn't make it in the prior cycle, and the restrictions are increased. So even if we might have a bunch of sites in our back pocket, if we can meet our numbers without putting them in writing, it's smart, because then they become more freely available for what we want to do with it next time, next cycle. So it's a long-range thinking. Just so you know that, I thought that was of interest. I also wanted to just comment on the ADUs. It is puzzling. Why would anyone, what are the incentives you can do since we don't have deed restriction as a likely option? But it's worth remembering that for HCD anyway, not that this really solves the problem that we're trying to solve, but if you don't rent it at all, it's also affordable in their minds. And again, staff will correct me if I'm misunderstanding anything, but in other words, they need to know either, is it rented a low rent in order to be considered affordable, or is it not rented? And if it's not rented, it's 0. In other words, if you have your mother in the unit, or your nurse, or you're in the unit, or your family's in the unit, that's considered affordable too. That's a more likely Carmel scenario, I think. But anyway, for what it's worth, that's just a little tidbit. For parking, as is made clear, I think people understand this here in the room, that this is not a parking element, it's a housing element, and there's just no aspect of it that is a study of parking. And I applaud Andy for all those major outreach efforts and finding out that, in fact, maybe nobody's coming to rescue us on the parking issue. And so I just want to point out that at least in our discussions, what we've come to understand is we're going to have to solve that separately. We're going to have to just do it. We're going to have to dig in and figure out what we want to do about parking, because this is the lay of the land, and the state housing people aren't in that business. They're just not in it. Oh, thanks, Marty. So this is just for you. This is just for you, Stephanie, wherever you are. Her question, I wasn't sure I quite understood it, but I think it's useful to build on Marnie's point about the whole genesis for this program was a market study that revealed to us that commercial rents off of the main drag are so low that converting or permitting this other use raises the rent beyond what you can charge commercially, even if it's a low, affordable, deed restricted. So we're talking about introducing a residential element in order to raise the rent beyond what's commercially chargeable now. So just question, and we don't know how this will fall out, how popular the program will be. I think for me anyway, and I think for many of the AHA folks and the staff, a lot of this when it comes to implementation, we'll just have to try something and see how it works. So at least my personal opinion at the moment is, from people we've talked to, et cetera, it seems like this is exciting because of all the reasons Marnie said, but also because it gives people an opportunity to charge residential level rent that is higher than commercial rent. And if that is not enough, then we can go in and tweak the program later if that's not operating in such a way. So that's my thought on that. And I think that was all that I wanted to say, except that it has been truly just an honor to be part of this process. I have enjoyed it so much, and it's just been super productive. I've really felt, first, this is sort of an emotional thing to say, but it's just been a type of interaction that has been so productive at every level, from down talking to folks on the sidewalk all the way up to the state house. And the idea that it's been, you know, I've used the word love fest. I feel like the state is very, very invested in they think this makes them look good, and they think that we're making Carmel look good. And it's been, for me anyway, sort of an emotional process of, in a positive way, of getting to know the state, you know, representative that we've been dealing with and seeing how proud he is of it. So it's just been a very positive thing. So I want to thank everyone for all the super constructive work. That's all.
Thank you for your comments, Victoria. Next speaker, please. Do we have anybody else in the chamber that wants to make comments? Okay, Shelby, the people online, must be some hands up. One. If whoever has their hand up, if they can hear me, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Is it Peter?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Peter, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. My name is Peter Prowse. I'm a land use attorney here in a representative capacity, the managing partner of the San Francisco law firm Briscoe, Prowse, Cow, Ivester, and Basil. The proposal before you today has some very interesting ideas, and I commend city staff and the AHA group for thinking outside the box, but it's still a ways off. The public has had basically no opportunity to review this document, which was posted online late last week for the first time. HCD has also not seen this document, and there will be at least 60 days of HCD review once it's sent to HCD. I also didn't hear staff say that they have heard interest from any current hotel owners in participating, and the hotel owner support will be critical to winning over HCD approval. You've got to prove to HCD that this is a feasible plan and that there's property owner interest. But perhaps most importantly, no CEQA has been done for this document, and there's no clarity on what the CEQA pathway here would be. Quite possibly a full-blown EIR would be required, given some of the concerns expressed from other commenters about parking and water issues. But the bottom line is this proposal could be a year or more away from adoption, in the best case. In the meantime, Carmel has had an approved housing element in place for more than a year that is valid and binding on Carmel. That plan calls for RFPs to be issued this December for Sunset Center and Vista Lobos. The existing housing element will still be fully enforced this December when that RFP deadline comes to pass. So what's the plan for complying with this RFP obligation by this December for those sites? Carmel will lose credibility with HCD and potentially expose itself to decertification of the existing housing element and to the builder's remedy if it uses the development of this new plan as an excuse for not complying with the currently effective plan, especially for the sites that Carmel currently owns and controls. I don't want to discourage Carmel from pursuing the ideas in this current proposal, but in the meantime, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have an approved plan that requires RFPs to go out in December. Carmel should put those RFPs out in December and see what you get. Putting an RFP out will be how Carmel discovers what the highest and best uses of those sites really are. There is developer interest in developing those sites into housing, hotels, and parking. Maybe you'll like what you see, maybe you won't. But those proposals, if you like them, can be incorporated into this housing element revision as you work through the other required processes over the next year or so. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, any last call, anybody here in the, come on up, Tim? You want to make some comments?
Yeah, good afternoon, Commission. Tim Toomey here. Just want to add a couple of comments. I worked on the hotel program with a local general manager of hotels here in Carmel, and we did talk to quite a few developers and some hotel owners. And once they understood the program, they were very, very interested in it. And I believe actually Fred might have been at one of those meetings a while back. So there, we have done that homework, and it's in chapter 2. It goes in a little bit in the appendix, a little bit more detail. We didn't mention who we talked to, but if you're interested, I could share that with you. And they're very sophisticated firms. You know, some local, some national, and some international. So I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Tim. Anyone else? Last call? Okay, no more hands up online. All right, I'm going to close the public comments, open it up to the commission for discussion. Looks like staff has something they would like to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of, we try to respond to comments when we can. Just had a couple of things. One of the questions was, how did the hotel keys get sold? They can be used and sold in various ways. They don't have to all be sold to one property. They can be sold individually to different properties that can use them for development. The implementation that Marnie's talked about will hash out a lot of the nuances of, will the city be sort of like a clearinghouse for the keys? They'll come to the city and then the city will help with the transaction, almost like an escrow. We don't have all that worked out. That's part of the implementation plan, but we do have written in there in the draft that they don't all have to go to one place. They just have to be used in a site that can take a hotel, essentially. So that was one of the things I wanted to make sure we respond to. Mr. Prowse had a couple of comments I just want to respond to. I think he made a comment that the community hasn't had a chance to review this yet. We did actually have a couple of larger scale community events during this amendment. But we are actually before, there's a regulatory process. I think Marnie talked about it a little bit. We're doing this meeting with the Planning Commission, then a meeting with the City Council. We came to you guys in May with largely the same program. And then we start with an actual public release for 7 days. Then there's a 60-day HCD comment period, which is also public. And so there's a lot of public work left to do. I think that was maybe a mischaracterization of the public not having had a chance to review this yet. So I just want to clear the record on that. In our meetings with our HCD representative, who is the manager of this region, we've talked to him several times about engaging in this amendment. And he's assured us that the December deadline, any of the deadlines that are in our housing element right now, are not going to be a death knell for this. So there was a comment about, if we pass that December deadline for getting an RFP out, it may cause our housing element to be decertified. Our counterpart at HCD has assured us that's not the case. And then last but certainly not least, CEQA, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. This meeting and the city council's meeting, you guys are not considering approving anything. There's no approvals today. We're still in the planning phase. CEQA is done when a project is approved, and so we certainly will comply with CEQA when we come back through for the adoption phase, but think about the housing element as the project. You can't actually apply CEQA until you have a static project. So if you guys give us feedback today, if the city council gives us feedback, if HED gives us feedback, and we have to change what the draft housing element looks like, we're changing the project. So the project isn't even static yet at this point, so you can't actually do CEQA on that. That's like basic CEQA work right there. So we will certainly do CEQA and comply with all CEQA regulations when we come through for the adoption process. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those clarifications, we appreciate that. Commissioner Karapetkov, you want to kick it off?
I'll try. It's a good continuation of the discussion we had last time.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. It is a continuation of the discussion we had last time. And again, the constraints are the same. We have the same constraints. It's water, it is parking, it's construction cost. So really it's how do we solve that problem with creating additional housing given these constraints? I ran some numbers here trying to figure out exactly what is the return on investment if somebody decides to build extra space for renting. And even with the market rate, it would take about 20 to 30 years to get a payback with a market rent. If you go to the subsidized rent from the table in the Appendix 8, it will extend the return on investment, make it maybe 50 years to get it back because it's so expensive to do construction, right? So maybe you can cut corners in certain ways, you can use cheaper materials, you can save some money here and there, but generally the cost of construction is so high that the return on investment becomes really like decades and decades before you actually can get the money back. So on the water issue, I always have problems with the 14 acres because I cannot imagine, I don't know if anybody can imagine what 14 acre feet of water is. So I would prefer the other number, basically divided by 0.0068 and say we have 205 extra bathrooms. I think I can imagine 205 bathrooms. I cannot imagine 14, acre feet of water. So really the idea is how do we allocate this 200, let's call them 200 bathrooms. The one issue is allocating them across the different projects. The other issue is something that Commissioner Locke also raised in the written statement here is if the goal is to attract younger families, not individuals living in these facilities, then we need more than one bathroom. So it's not just one bathroom per unit. So if we go that path and we plan a 2-bathroom units, we're down to 102 basically units that we can build with available water. So I think this kind of numbers kind of help understand, the magnitude of the issue and the opportunity we have here. So the cost, okay, I discussed the cost, the water, the parking. So now the parking, we have been discussing parking forever, and I'm not sure if there is a solution of that problem. Obviously, it is possible to underground parking. It is quite uncomfortable in terms of parking experience, and it is expensive. There's another solution that I personally did, but I don't think that anybody likes it, is basically to have one car for a family of 2. That works very well. Actually, it saves a parking space everywhere and all the time. But the majority of people I know have multiple cars. My neighbor on the left side there's 2 people, maybe 3, I'm not sure exactly. They have 5 cars. On the other side, there's a family of 4. They have 5 or 6. I'm always having problem counting because he has also a contractor truck and a couple of other vehicles. So somewhere between 5 and 6 vehicles for a family of 4. Now, it doesn't matter what we do if people have 2 or 3 cars. There's no way to solve that problem. Absolutely not. So anyway, call to action: just reduce the number of cars that you have. Maybe that will help with the city. And, yeah, very good proposals. I read the whole document. I think it's a great idea to leverage our unique situation with the hotels. That's unique to our city. Very few other places have such a hotel room density that we have here. So the more we can get out of this, the better. I didn't quite understand when we say that certain rooms are not kind of, I guess that they're not, what was the term that we were using? They're not, they don't bring enough money basically, and they can be candidates for.
Like underperforming.
They're underperforming, yeah. Is that a particular, can it be a particular room in a hotel, or is it the entire facility? The entire hotel?
The program right now is the entire property, so the entire hotel gets converted to a multifamily project.
Yeah. That would be, I think that's the biggest bang for the buck that I can see here, especially if we have hotels that have been used as apartment complexes before, assuming that the configuration works. I mean, you still need a kitchen, you still need to maybe reconfigure bathrooms, but it's still a minor remodel as opposite to building new square footage. So that would be a good approach. I'm less optimistic about the ADUs just because the cost of construction, unless we allow prefabricated ADUs that come on a truck for like, they cost like $50,000. That changes the calculation, but I don't see a lot of appetite for doing that. So if you're building from scratch with solid foundation and with solid walls and plumbing, electrical, etc., you are easily going into $500, $600, $700 a square foot. You can go to 1,000. And so at that price level, renting is not even, it's not even feasible in many cases. So you're just saying, okay, how much am I going to get back, right? Before I need to remodel this whole thing again. Because when you're renting, it's wear and tear, so you have to remodel it in a year or two. That is an additional cost that you need to take. So I'm not sure if this return on investment works in that way. Yeah, so I was very interested in the proposal of live work. I wasn't aware of that. So if it's true that in certain locations, the commercial rent is so low that it justifies converting into residential, have we seen any requests from property owners to rezone their properties and move it to residential?
Well, it wouldn't be a rezone, it's just not an allowed, it's currently not an allowed use, so it wouldn't be a rezone. It's like a new, that's the program, is we're creating a new use type essentially.
Okay. But what if the property is in a commercial district and somebody wants to convert it to residential?
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to rezone, or do we need to rezone?
No,
No?
but it's the combination of live and work in the same space.
Okay, if it's a combination, then it works. Okay.
Yeah.
That is a very interesting idea. I think if there's any way to make that work, that's wonderful. And it's great that the AHA group spent so much effort on this and investigated and found this particular opportunity. Thank you so much for your work, guys. Yeah.
You good? Yeah, okay, thank you. Commissioner Allen, your comments.
Yeah, so special thanks to the AHA group for sure. You're both impressive, and I really appreciate everything that you've done. It seems like that is how community involvement should work, and how communities such as ours should pull together. And I really appreciate the fact that you stepped up to do that and show us the way of how that can be done. And I love the 5-part strategy. It's creative and realistic. And I can see where the housing department is looking at our amendment very favorably. And when it's all broken down, it just seems like it's very doable. And I feel like they would see that as a true attempt to accomplish what the meaning of this is versus just slapping things down on a plan and submitting them without any real intent there. And so I can't wait to see traction. I think that especially for me, at least, the live work and the religious facilities, I think we're going to start to see traction immediately with those. And so I'm excited. I'm excited about this, and I applaud all the work that's gone into this, and I think it's fantastic. In terms of parking, I believe that that is an issue that we all are going to need to tackle. So I think that's AHA 2.0. Anyway, and then in regards to water, I just want to say that I still stand by what we submitted to the city council last month. So otherwise, I'm in complete favor for all of this, and I think it's fantastic.
Thank you, Commissioner Ahlborn, your comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am appreciative of my fellow commissioners' comments. I'd like to bring forward a comment that Commissioner Locke sent in writing, reminding us that for the hotel program with the water, that when those hotel keys go to another location, that will be a commercial use. And the City Council has not yet actually allocated any water for a commercial use. So just note to self there. And I'm sure the implementation for the hotel program will involve several discussions, and I'm confident that part of that will include ensuring that there isn't a net loss of hotel rooms in some way. That perhaps I should say that we will keep in balance our commitment to the Coastal Commission and for affordable accommodations for our visitors. All right, more comments. So this housing element, we've heard a lot about parking, and the housing element is just one part of the general plan. The general plan's what, 20 documents, I think? This is just one. And the land use and community character element is part of the general plan. It's also part of the local coastal program. That is 14 documents. And while we're talking about a housing element, here specifically, the Planning Commission, our responsibility is to all of the documentation and all of the programs in the city. And I'd just like to read a sentence or two from the land use and community character element. It's on page 1-25, and it reads, the ongoing improvement of public and private property must rely on adequate public services. When such services are constrained, think parking, folks. When services are constrained, efforts must be made either to increase their capacity or to allocate their use for the greatest benefit. Parking, folks have used the phrase elephant in the room. I think that parking is part of the Trojan horse of our sixth cycle. Whether we stay with the adopted 2024 or we go with this amendment, which, and I think that the programs proposed in the amendment are very much in keeping with the character of the city, and more aligned with the character of the city and the true fulfillment of our RENA than what we have in place. We do have something in place, though. Must always keep that in mind. If we look in Appendix C and we look at some of the tables, by my very rough estimate, we're looking at well over 150 bedroom units easily in the core commercial district, with no off-street parking. And if we look at historic parking studies in town, this is not news to anyone. We know that we have severe parking deficiencies in that core commercial district. I just don't see how we can, as a planning commission, recommend, knowing all of this, how we can recommend going forward with this amendment. Actually, I hope that we do recommend going forward with this amendment, but I don't see how we can do that while not also recommending to City Council some form of strategic parking management plan and requesting that that be added to council's agenda. I find that absolutely critical. To that point, I would suggest to City Council that they instruct staff to immediately begin some form of parking management strategic plan. And I'd like to be absolutely clear, I am not suggesting we hire a consultant to do a study, nor am I suggesting we form a new committee, or even use an existing committee. Staff knows this city well, but I do suggest that strategic plan involve communication with a very deep bench of the city's stakeholders. So staff, council, our business community, our residential community, our public safety community, and to add an accelerated performance deadline to that. Folks, you all know, because you've been here longer than me, most of you, this has been kicked down the road for how long? Thank you. Right? So let's really try to make this happen. 1,000 thanks to the resident group, the AHA group, 1,000 thanks. And a particular shout out, I know some of the members are here in chambers, and they have been dedicated, and they deserve a debt of gratitude from the city. I'd like to suggest that staff memorialize the work of the resident group and dissolve it and return all of this work to staff so that they can focus on implementation strategies and preparing the reports they'll need to bring to the different commissions, including Forest and Beach, including planning, and including City Council. I'd also like to recommend to City Council that they seriously consider amending the municipal code with a new amendment that would require all current and future affordable housing units that's in that very high fire hazard severity zone, right? Almost half of our city is in that zone. If we can, it is in our public safety's best interests, require that those units demonstrate that tenants will have permanent, reasonable, and daily access to parking during all of Carmel's seasons, that they also have access to that parking that's adequate to serve their needs in an emergency situation, and also that that tenant parking is not going to negatively impact the parking needs of customers and businesses surrounding the areas in which those new units are. I know that staff is working on an update to the ADU ordinance. Thank you very much. One thing, I don't know if this is possible, but I would suggest City Council consider instructing staff to conduct a strategic impact report on the impact that this additional arena will bring to our city to ensure that the city is able to provide for the basic tenant needs, things like daycare, laundry, parking, and medical services. Do a survey of availability as well as forecasted growth. Again, I'm not suggesting we hire a consultant or form a committee, but do some form of strategic impact report to make plans for the needs of our future residents and certainly to include family needs because those are real. And my last comment, hopefully for our November and December meetings for the Planning Commission and City Council, could we, if possible, see an updated draft ADU ordinance? And I recognize these timelines may be unreasonable, but could we see an updated draft ADU ordinance? If staff feels necessary, could we see edited proposed amendment documents if there's edits that are needed after these comments and discussions? Could we see a new set of those? Could we open a discussion for a parking management strategic plan with sets of goals, a schedule of meetings, public workshop dates, and assigned tasks? And lastly, could that water allocation be complete from City Council, should City Council find it so to make that resolution? Thank you.
It's quite a wish list. Okay, I just want to get this kind of back, what's happening here. We're reviewing an amendment to the sixth cycle housing element. And as one speaker pointed out, parking is not part of that. And I'm not suggesting that parking isn't a problem, because obviously it is, but it's just not part of this amendment. And so I think we need to keep that in mind. What this amendment is primarily about is the work of the AHA committee, and they've created 5 alternative programs to address our RENA requirement. And we have to meet that number. That's required by the city. So the question is here, do we think, the commission, that these 5 strategies are going to meet that number? And I think staff has demonstrated that there is a very real possibility that they've taken a very conservative approach to it. And obviously the AHA committee did a lot of research and came up with some good programs. And I think the big strength about the program is it's diversified. And that was the weakness of our the housing that we have now, because the city, because of time constraints, I think primarily that's kind of what I heard, was that they had to put the required numbers, which the big number is the low-income housing, that they had to put that on the city sites. I mean, the market rate housing, that's going to just naturally disperse itself through the city. So that was a big challenge, and that was the weakness of that. And so I think with the AHA committee, they responded to that, and they came up with a much broader, diversified program, and that gives us a better opportunity to meet this RENA number. How it's going to work out, which is going to, if this one's going to meet their goal or not, that's just going to have to happen over time, and we have to see what happens. I think the challenges or the constraints, obviously the deed restriction is a challenge, although I want to thank Victoria for pointing out to me that if you're not charging rent to a family member, that's low income. I hadn't even thought of that. And I'm always happy to learn something like that here. So that was obvious and very, I'm glad you said it. But that's something, because there's been a lot of talk about how ADUs are going to be used and whether or not they're going to be rented. And so that's a very clarion point. I think that's great. So, so I think, obviously I think I've heard everybody here, they're in support of this diversification and the amendment is being presented. I haven't heard anything other than these other broader concerns that would limit, or really change this amendment in any significant way. Staff can go back over it, and I'm sure council's going to weigh in on this. They're going to have a lot of comments too. The only thing that I would say, and this isn't really changing anything, and I'm on record before, and like I said, I think diversification is strength. And so the city sites still add diversification. And staff has made the point that they're not going to be constrained by the rules and the timelines of the state to do anything with that, and that adds flexibility. I think that's good, but I would also encourage that we as a community do request some RFPs to see what can be done with those. I mean, there was a really interesting project that I saw that was presented back in 2023, where 28 artist live-work studios on a two-story parking car garage on the North Sunset Center parking lot. There was a visitor center and also an art exhibit which would focus on the work, I assume, of the artists and residents that could live there. That's a very creative type of housing and parking solution. So there's a lot of things that could be done. And I think initially there was a lot of negative comments about concentrating the housing there at Sunset Center. And, there's some truth in that, but also because of this diversification we have now, we really could do some creative things which address parking, address housing, and do it in a way which respects the historic character and cultural elements of our community. So I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm getting a little off track here, I admit, but it's like we're saying, well, in King White's time, they were talking about parking. Well, this stuff gets kicked down the road, and unless there is something that creates immediacy, then these things really don't get addressed. And I also think that the city has an obligation to develop the property that it has to the best use, to its citizens. I heard somebody said that, we need to keep this stuff in reserve for the future. That's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is you develop properties to their best use, and that addresses the needs of the community in the moment. We just don't keep undeveloped properties like it's money in the bank. That's not really the way that we should be thinking about these properties. We need to look at these properties as solutions to the problems or the challenges that the community has. So that's a little bit off topic, but I think that's a good way, and a proper way that we should be looking at the assets that the community has and developing in those a way that best serve the community. And I think that addresses the best value of the property. So, having said that, we have a resolution from staff. Do we have a resolution? No, sir. We don't. Do we need to make a resolution, or are we just gonna send comments?
We're just getting your feedback today, so.
There's no resolution to send a recommendation to?
What we'll do is we will take and we will synthesize everything we heard from all of you today in a staff report to the city council. So we're essentially going to be carrying what we've heard from you today forward to the city council.
Okay, but I think most of the commission was pretty positive about the amendment, so.
Did you want to add something to my wish list?
Add something to your wish list?
Did you want to
You
add?
can add it. I don't know what it is. I mean, I can't read your mind, so.
Should we add a recommendation to city council to draft an RFP for best and highest use of those city-owned sites?
Well, I don't know if we can really,
You guys can.
at this point, can we, I don't know what, in terms of what was agendized here,
Yeah.
whether or not we can be making recommendations without it being noticed to the public and so forth. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable about, sending recommendations to the council, which weren't really agendized. But staff can weigh in on that.
I think it's okay. You said it was in a public meeting. It's fine. It's not, it's just something for them to get feedback on. The notion of an RFP or some sort of development on city-owned sites, that I would say that fits in, that's adjacent to what we're talking about tonight. The whole point of the amendment is to remove those city sites. So you as a planning commissioner saying, that's great, I'm supportive. I'm going to put words in your mouth for a second, so tell me if they're wrong. You're saying, I'm supportive of removing the city sites from the housing element, which commits us in a certain way, but I also think that the city at some point in the not too distant future should take a look at what the highest and best use of those sites is, and that might include launching an RFP. And you want the city council to be aware that that's your position.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
That's totally fair for you to say.
I've said. So, and I think that, I don't know if Commissioner Ahlborn is of that same opinion, or some of the other commissioners are, but.
I have room on my wish list, so that's
On your
okay,
wish
Chair.
list?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good.
Yeah, it doesn't, and I just want it to be totally clear for anybody listening here or online, like that doesn't mean that the city council is going to be considering launching an RFP at that meeting. If that were to happen, then there would be a properly noticed meeting that would be agendized, so people would know that that's what the conversation was going to be. This is just delivering feedback.
Well, that was what I was concerned about.
And that's a good concern to have. Thank you for having that.
I don't want to, get too far out of, the subject matter which we are supposed to be talking about. And also I want to make, have an opportunity for the public to weigh in on something like that. And I think if an RFP is going to be put out for a particular project, the city needs to set the parameters on that, on the basis of what the concerns are of the public and what's best for the community. And also, I think what people need to realize, an RFP is not a commitment on the part of the city to move on anything. It's just, it's basically a tool to sort of cast out onto the water and get some ideas and some possible commitments, so. Okay, any other comments from the commissioners? Any other announcements or things we need from staff or on our agenda?
No, sir.
I'm sure I didn't leave anything off here. I have tried to adjourn these meetings early sometimes with not doing everything. The director's on here, so we're not gonna have a director's report or anything. Are you gonna did you have some comments?
No, I would never do such a thing.
You're not gonna stick.
We talked enough tonight, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for their comments. They were great, and we are adjourned.